I discovered my HOA president was stealing from us when I noticed the landscaping bill jumped from $3,000 to $7,000 in a single month without any visible improvement to our neighborhood. My name is Brandon Wells, and I had been living in the Meadowbrook Heights subdivision in Scottsdale, Arizona for 6 years before everything went sideways. The community was nice enough, with perfectly manicured lawns, a pool, and tennis courts that actually got used. Our HOA fees were reasonable at $250 a month, and for the most part, things ran smoothly. That is, until Richard Drummond took over as president. Richard moved into the neighborhood about 3 years ago with his wife Patricia. He was one of those guys who immediately wanted to be in charge of everything. Within 6 months of moving in, he was on the HOA board. Within a year, he was president. He was in his early 50s, always wore polo shirts with khaki pants, and had this way of talking down to everyone like he was doing us all a favor by being there. Most people found him annoying, but harmless. I should have paid more attention to the warning signs. The first real issue came during a board meeting in March. I had been elected to the board the previous year, mostly because I was an accountant and people figured I would keep an eye on the finances. Smart move, as it turned out. We were sitting in the community center, a small building near the pool that smelled like chlorine and old carpet. There were 5 board members total. Richard as president, Karen Mitchell as vice president, myself as treasurer, Linda Chen as secretary, and Tom Rodriguez as a general member. Richard cleared his throat importantly. Item number 7 on the agenda is approving the new landscaping contract. I have obtained 3 bids as required, and I recommend we go with Desert Bloom Services. They came in at $6,800 per month. I looked up from my notes. That is more than double what we are currently paying Green Valley Landscaping. What is the justification for such a dramatic increase? Richard's smile tightened. Desert Bloom offers premium services, enhanced irrigation monitoring, weekly lawn treatments, seasonal flower rotations in all common areas. Green Valley has been adequate, but we need to think about property values. Karen nodded enthusiastically. I think it sounds wonderful. Our entrance could use more flowers. Can I see the bids? I asked. Richard slid a folder across the table. I flipped through the 3 proposals. Desert Bloom was indeed the middle bid. One company called Sunset Landscaping had quoted $8,200, and another called Arizona Green Solutions came in at $6,500. All 3 were significantly higher than our current $3,000 monthly contract. These are all more than double our current cost, I said. Did you get a renewal quote from Green Valley? They have become unreliable, Richard said quickly. Last month they missed a mowing cycle. Tom spoke up. I did not notice any missed mowing. The place has looked fine to me. Trust me, I have been monitoring this closely, Richard said. We need to make a change. I move to approve Desert Bloom Services at $6,800 per month for a 12-month contract. I second, Karen said immediately. I held up my hand. Wait, I would like to see references from Desert Bloom and maybe visit some of their other properties. This is a significant financial commitment. Richard's face flushed slightly. Brandon, I appreciate your diligence, but I have already done the due diligence. These are all reputable companies. We need to vote tonight so the new contractor can start April 1st. Why the rush? I asked. Because Green Valley needs 30 days notice to terminate, and I already gave it to them 2 weeks ago, Richard said. The room went quiet. Linda looked up from her laptop where she was taking minutes. You terminated our current contract without board approval. Richard waved his hand dismissively. It was a preliminary notice, contingent on board approval of a replacement. Standard procedure. It was not standard procedure, and we all knew it, but Richard had been president long enough to push things through, and honestly, most of the board did not want to argue with him. We took a vote. Karen and Tom voted yes, Linda abstained, and I voted no. The motion passed 3-1 with 1 abstention. I went home that night irritated, but not yet suspicious. My wife Sarah was already asleep. I sat at the kitchen table with a beer and looked over the Desert Bloom proposal again. Something about it bothered me, but I could not put my finger on what. The services listed were comprehensive, maybe overly so. The letterhead looked professional. The business license number was listed at the bottom. On a whim, I pulled out my laptop and looked up Desert Bloom Services with the Arizona Corporation Commission. The company had been registered 8 months ago. The registered agent was listed as Richard Drummond. My stomach dropped. I searched for the other 2 companies that had submitted bids. Sunset Landscaping had been registered 7 months ago, also with Richard Drummond as registered agent. Arizona Green Solutions did not exist at all in the state business registry. I sat back in my chair, my heart pounding. Richard had created fake companies to submit bids to himself. The whole bidding process was fraudulent. He was essentially hiring his own company and billing the HOA more than double what we were currently paying. I did not sleep much that night. The next morning, I called an emergency meeting with Linda and Tom, leaving Richard and Karen out of it. We met at a coffee shop near the neighborhood. I showed them what I had found. Linda's eyes widened. "Are you sure? I mean, maybe it is a coincidence. Maybe Richard just helped them register their businesses." "Why would he not disclose that then?" Tom said. "This smells really bad." "What do we do?" Linda asked. "We need to look at the books more carefully," I said. "See if there are any other irregularities. Then we need to confront Richard, probably with a lawyer present." Tom shook his head. "Man, I signed up for this board to help pick out pool furniture and approve fence colors. I did not sign up for fraud investigation." "None of us did," I said. "But if we do not do something, Richard is going to steal thousands of dollars from every homeowner here." We agreed to meet again after I had time to do a thorough audit. As treasurer, I had access to all the HOA bank statements and records, but Richard had been controlling most of the actual bill paying through the management company. Our HOA used Summit Property Management to handle day-to-day operations, and Richard had developed a close relationship with their point person, a woman named Brenda. I spent the next week going through every transaction from the past 2 years. What I found made my blood run cold. Desert Bloom was not Richard's first scheme. He had been doing this for at least 18 months, just more subtly. Our pool maintenance contract had switched to a company called Clear Water Pool Services about a year ago. The monthly cost went from $800 to $1,500. Clear Water Pool Services was registered to Richard Drummond. Our pest control company had changed to Desert Shield Pest Management 9 months ago, increasing from $150 to $400 monthly. Also registered to Richard Drummond, I made a spreadsheet documenting everything. Over the past 18 months, Richard had funneled approximately $120,000 from HOA funds into his various shell companies. The actual work was being done by subcontractors. He was paying much less, and he was pocketing the difference. I had evidence of at least 7 different fake companies he had created. I called Linda and Tom back for another meeting. This time I also invited Janet Sullivan, a real estate attorney who lived in the neighborhood. Janet reviewed my spreadsheet and whistled low. "This is embezzlement," she said. "Probably fraud too, depending on how the contracts were executed. You need to report this to the police." "Should we confront Richard first?" Linda asked. Janet shook her head firmly. "Absolutely not. If you tip him off, he will destroy evidence and possibly disappear with whatever money he has not spent yet. You need to go to the police today, and you need to call an emergency board meeting to suspend his access to HOA funds immediately." My hands were shaking. I have never dealt with anything like this before. "None of us have," Tom said. "But Janet is right. We need to protect the HOA and the homeowners." That afternoon, I went to the Scottsdale Police Department with my spreadsheet and all the supporting documentation I had compiled. I met with a detective named Martinez who specialized in white-collar crime. He was a solid guy in his 40s who listened carefully as I explained everything. "How much total are we talking about?" Martinez asked. "At least $120,000 over 18 months, probably more if he has other schemes I have not found yet," I said. Martinez nodded slowly. "And you have documentation showing these companies are registered to him?" "Yes, from the Corporation Commission website. I have screenshots and printouts." "Good. That is good." Martinez made some notes. "Here is what is going to happen. I'm going to open an investigation. We will need to subpoena bank records for these shell companies and probably for Richard Drummond personally. That takes time. In the meantime, you need to shut off his access to HOA money immediately. Can you do that?" "We are calling an emergency board meeting tonight," I said. "Do not tell him what it is about," Martinez warned. Just say it is urgent HOA business. The last thing we need is him emptying accounts and running. I left the police station feeling surreal. I had lived in Meadowbrook Heights for 6 years. I had waved to Richard at the mailbox, our kids had played together at the pool, and now I was getting him investigated for stealing from all of us. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 7 that evening. I'd sent an email to all board members saying we needed to discuss an urgent financial matter. Richard showed up right on time, looking annoyed. "What is this about, Brandon? I have dinner plans," he said. "This will not take long," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Linda, Tom, and Janet were already there. Karen showed up a few minutes late, looking confused. "Why is Janet here?" Richard asked. "She is not on the board." "I asked her to attend as legal counsel," I said. "We have discovered some irregularities in the HOA finances that need to be addressed immediately." Richard's face went very still. "What kind of irregularities?" I slid a copy of my spreadsheet across the table. "Multiple vendors that have been paid by the HOA are registered to you personally. You did not disclose your ownership interest in these companies when the board approved the contracts. That is a violation of your fiduciary duty and probably several laws." The room was dead silent. Richard looked at the spreadsheet, then at me, then at Janet. I could see him calculating, trying to figure out his next move. "This is absurd," he said finally. "Those companies are not mine. I may have helped them with their business registration as a favor, but I have no ownership interest. The Corporation Commission lists you as the registered agent, the incorporator, and in most cases, the sole director," I said. "Bank records will show whether you have been depositing HOA checks into accounts you control." "You have no authority to access bank records," Richard said. His voice had an edge now. Janet spoke up. "The board absolutely has authority to investigate potential fraud, and the police definitely have that authority." Richard's head snapped toward me. "You went to the police?" "I reported what I found." "Yes," I said. "You son of a bitch," Richard said, standing up. "You have no idea what you have done. I will sue you personally for defamation." "Sit down, Richard," Tom said quietly. "Getting angry is not going to help." Richard did not sit down. "I am done here. You people are insane. I am resigning from the board effective immediately." He grabbed his phone and walked toward the door. "We are freezing your access to all HOA accounts," I called after him, "and voting to remove you as signatory on the bank accounts." Richard turned at the door. "Good luck with that. I am the president. I'm the only one who can authorize that." "Actually, any 3 board members can vote to suspend another board member pending an investigation," Janet said. "And Brandon becomes acting president in your absence. It is in the bylaws." Richard looked like he wanted to say something else, but instead, he just left, slamming the door behind him. Karen was staring at me in shock. "Brandon, what is going on? Are you seriously accusing Richard of stealing?" "Look at the spreadsheet, Karen," I said, sliding a copy to her. "The evidence is pretty clear." She looked at it for a long moment, her face going pale. "Oh my God." We took a vote. 4-0 with Richard absent, we suspended Richard from the board pending investigation and removed him as signatory on all HOA accounts. We also voted to terminate contracts with Desert Bloom Services, Clearwater Pool Services, Desert Shield Pest Management, and 4 other companies linked to Richard. Janet helped us draft a letter to Summit Property Management instructing them not to process any further payments to those vendors without new board approval. I went home that night exhausted. Sarah was waiting up for me. "How did it go?" she asked. "About as badly as you would expect," I said. I filled her in on the meeting. "Richard knows we are onto him now. I am worried about what he might do." "You did the right thing," Sarah said. "I know this is stressful, but you could not just let him keep stealing." The next morning, I got a call from Brenda at Summit Property Management. She sounded stressed. "Brandon, I just got your letter about suspending payments to those vendors. But Richard called me last night and said to ignore any instructions from you, that you were removed from the board." "Richard was suspended from the board last night," I said. "I'm acting president now. Did he ask you to make any payments?" "He wanted me to process the monthly invoice from Desert Bloom, about $6,800. I told him I needed to wait until I heard from you." My stomach clenched. "Do not process that payment. In fact, do not process anything Richard requests without approval from me or another board member. I am sending you documentation of last night's vote." Okay, Brenda said slowly. Can I ask what is going on? Richard has been using shell companies to overcharge the HOA, I said. The police are investigating. Jesus, Brenda said. I had no idea. I just processed whatever invoices came through that had board approval. I know, you are not in trouble. We just need to make sure no more money goes out to his fake companies. Over the next few days, things escalated quickly. Richard hired a lawyer who sent us a threatening letter claiming we had defamed him and violated his rights by removing him from the board without due process. Janet responded with a letter detailing the evidence against him and suggesting his attorney might want to focus on criminal defense rather than HOA politics. Detective Martinez called to update me on the investigation. We have subpoenaed bank records for the shell companies and for Richard Drummond personally. Should have them in a week or two. In the meantime, I've been talking to some of the actual contractors who did the work. Interesting picture emerging. What do you mean? I asked. Well, for example, that Desert Bloom landscaping company. We tracked down who actually did the work. Small outfit called Lopez Landscaping. They were getting paid $3,500 a month by Desert Bloom to service your neighborhood. Desert Bloom was billing your HOA $6,800. Richard was keeping the difference. That is $3,300 a month just on landscaping, I said, doing the math. Almost $40,000 a year. And he had multiple schemes running simultaneously, Martinez said. This guy was pulling in probably $80,000 to $100,000 a year in fraud, on top of whatever legitimate income he had. What happens now? I asked. Once we get the bank records, if they show what we think they will show, I will present the case to the county attorney's office. They will decide whether to file charges. Based on what I'm seeing, I'm confident they will. How long does that take? Could be a few months. White-collar cases move slower than other crimes, but we will get there. Meanwhile, the neighborhood was in an uproar. Word had gotten out about why Richard was removed from the board. I started getting emails and phone calls from homeowners. Some were supportive, thanking me for uncovering the fraud. Others were angry that I had made such serious accusations without more proof. A few thought I was on a power trip and had made the whole thing up to take over as president. The worst was Richard's wife, Patricia. She showed up at my door on a Saturday morning, her eyes red from crying. "How could you do this to us?" she demanded. "Richard is a good man. He's done so much for this neighborhood, and you have destroyed his reputation over some misunderstanding about business registrations." I felt bad for her. She probably had no idea what her husband had been doing. "Patricia, I am sorry you're going through this, but this is not a misunderstanding. Richard created fake companies and used them to overcharge the HOA. The police are investigating. He told me you were jealous of him, that you wanted to be president and pushed him out," she said. "That's not true. I never wanted to be president. I just wanted to make sure HOA money was being spent properly." "We have 3 kids, Brandon," Patricia said, her voice breaking. "If Richard gets arrested, if he loses his job, what are we supposed to do?" I did not have a good answer for that. "I'm sorry, Patricia. I really am. But I could not let him keep stealing from everyone," she left without another word. I felt sick to my stomach for the rest of the day. As acting president, I had to deal with a mountain of problems Richard had left behind. We needed to hire new vendors for landscaping, pool service, pest control, and several other things. We had to rebuild trust with the homeowners. We had to review every contract and every expense to make sure there were no other schemes we had missed. It was overwhelming. Linda stepped up to help a lot. She spent hours with me going through old records, looking for any other red flags. We found a few more questionable transactions, but nothing as blatant as the fake companies. Tom helped interview new vendors and get legitimate bids for services. Even Karen, once she got over the initial shock, started helping by communicating with angry homeowners and trying to calm people down. About 6 weeks after the emergency board meeting, Detective Martinez called me. "We have got the bank records. You were right about everything. Richard has been depositing HOA checks into accounts for these shell companies, then transferring the money to his personal accounts. We can trace about $135,000 over the past 2 years. "So what happens now?" I asked. "I am meeting with the county attorney next week to present the case. Barring any surprises, they will file charges, probably multiple counts of fraud, theft, and maybe some other financial crimes. We are talking potential felony charges." My mouth went dry. "Felony?" He stole over $100,000, Brandon. That is serious crime. Arizona does not mess around with this stuff. 2 weeks later, Richard was arrested at his home. I was not there, but I heard about it from several neighbors who watched the police put him in handcuffs and put him in the back of a patrol car. Patricia and the kids were standing on the front lawn crying. The whole neighborhood was watching. It was awful. Richard was charged with 7 counts of fraud and 5 counts of theft, all felonies. His bail was set at $50,000. He posted bail the next day, probably using money he had stolen. The arrest made the local news. The headline read, HOA president arrested for allegedly embezzling over $100,000 from Scottsdale community. I got death threats, not from Richard directly, but from people who thought I had destroyed his life over nothing. Someone spray-painted snitch on my garage door. Sarah started getting nervous about the kids playing outside. It was bad. But I also got support. Other homeowners came forward with their own suspicions about Richard that they had never reported. One woman told me Richard had pressured her into approving a new fence contractor who turned out to be another shell company. Another homeowner showed me emails where Richard had been vague about vendor costs and had shut down questions. The HOA filed a civil lawsuit against Richard to recover the stolen money. Our insurance covered part of the loss, but we still needed to get back as much as we could. Richard countersued, claiming we had defamed him and destroyed his business reputation. It was a mess. The criminal case moved slowly. Richard's lawyer filed motions to dismiss, motions to suppress evidence, motions for everything imaginable. The county attorney's office was confident but told us to be patient. Detective Martinez kept me updated when he could, but there were long stretches where I heard nothing. In the meantime, life in Meadowbrook Heights tried to return to normal. We hired a new landscaping company at a reasonable rate. The pool looked great. We organized a neighborhood barbecue to try to bring everyone together. Some people came, some did not. The community was divided. About 8 months after Richard's arrest, his lawyer approached the county attorney's office about a plea deal. Richard would plead guilty to reduce charges in exchange for a lighter sentence and agreement to pay restitution. The county attorney called me to get the HOA's input. "What are the terms?" I asked. He would plead guilty to 3 felony fraud counts. The other charges would be dismissed. He would get 3 years in prison with possibility of early release after 18 months for good behavior. And he has to pay full restitution to the HOA, $135,000 plus interest. "Will he actually pay the restitution?" I asked. "We will garnish his wages and put liens on his assets if necessary. Most white-collar criminals do pay restitution eventually, because the alternative is worse." I thought about it. Part of me wanted Richard to face all the charges and get the maximum sentence, but another part of me just wanted this to be over. "What do you recommend?" "Honestly, take the deal. Going to trial is risky. Juries can be unpredictable, especially in white-collar cases, and even if we win at trial, he might not get much more time than this. 3 years in prison is serious. It sends a message." I talked it over with the board and with Janet. Everyone agreed the plea deal was reasonable. Richard formally entered his guilty plea in November. The judge accepted it and scheduled sentencing for January. The sentencing hearing was intense. I attended with Linda and Tom. The courtroom was about half full, mostly with HOA members who wanted to see justice done. Patricia was there with Richard's lawyer. She looked exhausted. The prosecutor laid out the facts of the case. Richard had created multiple shell companies, submitted fraudulent bids, awarded contracts to himself, and embezzled over $135,000 over 2 years. The money had gone to pay for vacations, his kids' private school tuition, a boat, and other personal expenses. Richard's lawyer argued for leniency. He said Richard had no prior criminal record, had cooperated with the investigation, and was deeply remorseful. He had been under financial stress and made terrible decisions. His family would suffer if he went to prison. Then, the judge asked if Richard wanted to say anything. Richard stood up, looking smaller than I remembered. "Your Honor, I take full responsibility for what I did. I betrayed the trust of my neighbors and my community. I let my family down. I let myself down. I do not have a good excuse for my actions. I was greedy and thought I could get away with it. I am sorry." It sounded rehearsed, but maybe it was genuine. I could not tell. The judge was not sympathetic. "Mr. Drummond, you held a position of trust in your community. People elected you to manage their money and their property. Instead, you set up an elaborate scheme to steal from them. This was not a one-time mistake. This was systematic fraud over a long period of time. You created fake companies, submitted fake bids, and funneled money into your own pockets while people trusted you to do the right thing." The judge sentenced Richard to 3 years in the Arizona Department of Corrections as agreed in the plea deal. He also ordered restitution of $135,000 plus $12,000 in interest and costs. Richard would report to begin his sentence in 2 weeks. Patricia sobbed as the bailiff led Richard away. I felt no satisfaction in that moment, just exhaustion and sadness that it had come to this. Richard reported to prison in mid-January. The HOA continued its civil lawsuit to recover damages beyond the criminal restitution. Our insurance had covered about $40,000 of the losses. We recovered another $75,000 through liens on Richard's house and bank accounts. The remaining amount would come through wage garnishment after Richard was released from prison. Things slowly got better in Meadowbrook Heights. We elected a new permanent board president, a retired teacher named George who had no interest in stealing from anyone. We implemented new financial controls, 2 signatures on all checks over $500, quarterly audits by an outside accounting firm, and disclosure requirements for any board member with a financial interest in HOA vendors. I remained as treasurer for another year, then stepped down. I had done what I needed to do, but I was burned out. The experience had taken a toll on me and on Sarah. We thought about moving, but ultimately decided to stay. This was our home, and we were not going to be driven out by one corrupt board president. I ran into Patricia about 2 years after Richard went to prison. She was at the grocery store with her kids. We made awkward eye contact in the produce section. "Hi, Brandon," she said quietly. "Hi, Patricia. How are you doing?" "Managing. The kids are okay. I'm working full-time now. It has been hard." "I'm sure it has," I said. I did not know what else to say. "Richard gets out in a few months," she said. "He has been a model prisoner, apparently. Early release." "What will you do?" "We are probably going to move. Fresh start somewhere. This neighborhood has too many bad memories." "I understand," I said, and I did. "For what it is worth, I know you did the right thing," Patricia said. "I was angry for a long time, but Richard did steal that money. He admitted it to me eventually. You were just doing your job." "Thank you for saying that," I said. It meant more than she probably knew. We went our separate ways. I never saw Patricia or Richard again. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that they moved to Nevada after Richard got out of prison. He got a job doing sales or something. They rebuilt their lives somewhere else. As for me, I learned some important lessons from the whole experience. I learned that people will take advantage if given the opportunity and no oversight. I learned that doing the right thing is often incredibly difficult and painful. I learned that communities are fragile and trust is hard to rebuild once broken. But I also learned that most people are good and want to do the right thing when given the chance. The neighborhood recovered. Property values stayed stable. We got new families moving in who had no idea about the scandal. The pool still gets used every summer. The tennis courts are busy. The landscaping looks good. Life goes on. I stayed on the board in various capacities for several more years. I made sure we maintained strong financial controls. I audited the books regularly. I asked questions when something did not look right. And I never forgot what happens when good people fail to pay attention to those in positions of trust. Looking back, I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I had not noticed that landscaping bill increase. How long would Richard have continued stealing? How much money would he have taken? Would he have eventually gotten caught some other way, or would he have just kept going until he moved away or retired from the board? I will never know the answers to those questions, but I do know that I made the right choice in investigating and reporting what I found. It cost Richard his freedom and nearly destroyed his family. It divided the neighborhood and caused me enormous stress, but it was still the right thing to do. The legal system worked the way it was supposed to. The investigation was thorough. Richard got due process. He was able to plead guilty to reduced charges. He served his time and paid his debt to society. The HOA recovered most of its losses. Justice, imperfect as it always is, was done. These days, I'm much less involved in HOA politics. I go to the occasional meeting. I vote on important issues. But I let other people take the lead. I have done my part. Other people can step up now. Sarah and I are still in the same house. Our kids are older now. They barely remember Richard or the scandal. To them, it is just ancient history, something that happened when they were little. They play at the pool in summer and ride their bikes around the neighborhood and have no idea that their dad once helped put someone in prison for stealing from the HOA. I'm okay with that. Life moves forward. Neighborhoods change. New people move in and old people move out. The world keeps turning. But the lesson remains. Pay attention to your community's finances. Ask questions when something seems wrong. Do not assume that people in positions of trust are always trustworthy. And if you do discover fraud or corruption, report it, even when it is hard. Because in the end, living in a community means we are all responsible for each other. We all have to do our part to keep things honest and fair. That is how communities survive and thrive, not through perfect people, because none of us are perfect, but through regular people who are willing to do the right thing when it matters, even when the cost is high. I think about Richard sometimes. I wonder if he learned anything from the experience. I wonder if he regrets what he did, truly regrets it, not just regrets getting caught. I wonder if he has rebuilt his life in Nevada and is living honestly now. I hope so. I do not wish him ongoing misery. I just wish he had never stolen from us in the first place. The whole experience changed me in ways I'm still discovering. I'm more cynical about people in power. I am more likely to question authority and demand transparency. But I am also more appreciative of honest people who do their jobs with integrity. They are the unsung heroes of communities everywhere, the people who could take advantage but choose not to, who could cut corners but do not, who uphold their responsibilities even when no one is watching. Those are the people who make communities work, not the Richards of the world who see positions of trust as opportunities for personal gain. But the regular folks who show up to boring meetings, who read the financial reports, who ask tough questions, who volunteer their time without expecting anything in return except a well-run community. I try to be one of those people, even though I failed at it for a while when I did not notice what Richard was doing sooner. I could have caught him earlier if I had been paying closer attention. That is on me. But once I did notice, I followed through. I did what needed to be done. And that has to count for something. The Meadowbrook Heights HOA is stronger now than it was before the scandal. We have better systems in place. We have more engaged homeowners. We have a board that takes its responsibilities seriously. The price we paid was high, but we learned important lessons. Sometimes that is the best you can hope for when something goes wrong. I still live on Saguaro Drive in Meadowbrook Heights in Scottsdale, Arizona. I still pay my $250 a month in HOA fees, though we had to raise it temporarily to $275 to cover some of the losses from the fraud. I still use the pool and the tennis courts. I still wave to my neighbors and attend the occasional block party. Life is normal now, or as normal as it ever gets. But I keep the spreadsheet I created, the one documenting all of Richard's shell companies and fraudulent transactions. I keep it as a reminder of what can happen when we stop paying attention, when we trust too much and verify too little. I keep it so I never forget that eternal vigilance is the price of living in a community. Someone has to watch the watchers. Someone has to ask the uncomfortable questions. Someone has to be willing to do the hard thing when they discover wrongdoing. That someone was me in this case. It might be you and yours. If you ever find yourself in a position where you discover fraud or corruption, I hope you will be brave enough to report it. I hope you will be strong enough to withstand the pushback and criticism. I hope you will remember that doing the right thing, while difficult, is always worth it in the end. Because communities are built on trust, and trust requires honesty. When someone violates that trust, when someone steals from their neighbors and betrays their responsibilities, they need to be held accountable, not out of revenge or anger, but out of a commitment to justice and fairness. That is what I tried to do. That is what I hope I accomplished, despite all the pain and stress and division it caused. Richard Drummond hired his own company and billed us double. I audited the books and got him arrested. That is the simple version of the story. But the real story is much more complicated, much messier, and much more human than any simple headline can capture. It is a story about betrayal and courage, about greed and integrity, about the price of justice and the cost of corruption. It is a story about ordinary people dealing with extraordinary circumstances and trying their best to do the right thing. It is my story, and it is over now. Richard is out of prison, living somewhere else, hopefully living honestly. The HOA has moved on. The neighborhood is healed, mostly. And I have returned to being just another homeowner, paying my fees and enjoying my community, keeping an eye on things but letting others lead. That is how it should be. We all take turns watching out for each other. We all contribute what we can. And when something goes wrong, we hope someone will have the courage to speak up and make it right. That is what community means. That is what justice requires. And that is the lesson I learned from the day I noticed our landscaping bill had doubled without explanation and decided to investigate rather than ignore it. It was the right decision. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. And I would do it again if I had to, because that is what it means to be part of a community. We look out for each other. We hold each other accountable. And we do the right thing even when it costs us dearly. That is my story. That is what happened when my HOA president hired his own company and billed us double. I audited the books. I reported the fraud. I testified when needed. And Richard got arrested, pleaded guilty, and went to prison. Justice was served. The neighborhood survived, and life went on, as it always does.